Hello and welcome to From Our Perspective, Two Therapist Moms and a Mic. I'm Claudia Glassman
I'm Katie Truex.
and we're back.
Yes, after Claudia's long winter,
Long winter,
winter's
long
nap.
vacation. Ah, back to reality. So we are going to do Q&As today.
Yes, so
Um,
exciting. We have cues.
we have Q's and we're going to give the A's. Yeah,
Mhm.
so it's been a while since we've been around. Um,
Claudia's now a world traveler.
yes, I am. It was lovely.
I went 2 states over. No, 3 states over.
Look at,
I went
yay,
through Florida. What's it? Mississippi, Alabama, and into Louisiana.
look at you. You're a Southeasterner traveler. Pretty south. All right. So we got questions. And I think we can just kind of go from there. We got a lot of questions about babies and
Mhm.
bonding. We got questions about what products we recommend and books and things like that. But full disclosure, it's been a minute since we've had babies. So I'm not going to go into those because I don't actually, I'm not up to date on new products. There are
Yeah.
strollers and car seats that are new that look fantastic, that I don't know anything about them. So I don't feel comfortable recommending anything that I haven't tried.
Now, when we were choosing our stuff, I did my research by asking you, and you did research. Was there a site that you could send people to that you found during that time that might have the current information, like that you recommended the source of? Does that make sense? Or you don't remember?
I
It's been a long
don't
time.
it's been a while. I don't remember. I can tell you the things I looked into, but those might not be concerns for everyone because I'm sure people have picked up on our like kind of natural tendencies through some of the things we talk about. So I was looking at flame retardant free car seats that were low in toxins and things like that. And then obviously safety rated, but I think most car seats for sale are rated, they're like all safety tested. I cannot remember where I found all that information, but I'm sure there are so many more options available today. Um,
Well, our listeners should just need a friend like you, because I just was like, dude,
yeah,
what should I buy? And you're like, this one. I'm like, okay, thanks.
there was a book. Wait, no, I had a book. I had a book of all things. It recommended furniture. What the hell was that book? I don't remember. Um,
Okay.
there was a
You
book that was
have
like
books.
updated regularly and it had all these products in it. It walked you through everything. But even with that, I mean, we bought a stroller we never used. I mean, I
Yes.
also hesitate because the way I did things, like I think you wore Ellie a lot too. You had a carrier because I remember strapping Ellie to me.
Yes, and gosh, if I could not, that would be one thing. I think that might be my first recommendation
Baby
to parents.
wearing.
Yes, my
Game changer.
God, it's life changing for the child and it's life changing for the parent. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the best thing, man.
Mm-hmm.
It saves you a shit ton of money if you don't, if you're on a budget, which, people think they have to buy all this stuff and they don't. It's just so freeing. It's financially freeing, it's physically freeing, it's emotionally freeing. It's just a beautiful thing to baby wear.
Yeah, I definitely feel like getting a good baby carrier that works for you. There's all kinds. I think I had the Moby, which was the one you tie yourself. That one was overwhelming to me. I ended up
Same.
ditching that.
Yep.
But for those that,
In infancy, like before she was big enough for, we had the ergo of the infant insert, but even that,
insert, yeah.
like initially, like first few weeks before she could go in there, when she was just a little bean, like I used a Moby too and strapped myself
Yeah.
up. But yeah,
Yeah. I do love baby wearing.
you wore my baby on the back and your baby on the front.
Yeah, I wore two babies. They make twin baby. I saw a girl with a double baby carrier. I didn't know that existed when we were like watching each other's kids, but I would have invested in that had I found it. And then with Kenzie, when I had my second, it was great because that kid just lived strapped to me and nursed and didn't like, she just hung out there because I had to chase a 2-year-old. So that was I loved it. Both of us had kids in the summer, so I think we did run a little hot, but
Yeah.
that was a game changer for me too. And it kept your hands free to do other things and your baby close, and it was lovely.
Yes. And then it allowed you to go out into the world sooner rather than later. And that I think was good for their social and emotional development, for immune development, for our social and emotional wellness. I mean,
Yeah.
I had Ellie the other day. She goes, Mommy, I don't know why. I just love going to Whole Foods because we usually prime our groceries now, right? And Whole Foods is a 30-minute or more drive for us here, which I'm so spoiled. It was the same when we lived in Atlanta, but like now that I live 8 minutes from my office. I'm like, oh, that's a ways to go for groceries.
Yeah.
So I said, well, honey, do you remember that? Did you know that was the very first place you ever went at 7 days old? You went to Whole Foods strapped to me. She was like, what? Just like you, me in a stroller and a cart? How'd you do all that? I said, no, no, no. You were never in a stroller. The only time you were ever in a stroller was when I was exercising and we
Yeah.
would go out for walks. I said, other than that, you were right on me. And she was like, oh yeah, I remember. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I would recommend a good baby carrier, but I don't have one specific. Like I think I had like 3 or 4. I think I still have one that I put my kids in like a year ago and they still fit. Like heavy, but they fit.
Look, we found Ellie's. I'll have to send you this picture. I will text you this. We found Ellie's in her treasure box, and ours was an ergo, which ergo is the name comes after being ergonomically correct. I'm married to a chiropractor, and there is a thing. My guess would be it could be that all of them now are this way, but when our kids were little, it wasn't the case. There's some that the positioning of the baby puts stress on the spinal cord, and there's others that do not. So
Mm.
look to that. Ergo at the time was kind of the leader of the ones that did not, and then others came along shortly thereafter. I think you had maybe like a Tula or something. Does that ring a bell? I don't
Yeah,
know.
or something like that. But they were
But
bigger at that point because there was something with like hip positioning. And again, I researched, I mean, a lot of years have passed. And I researched a lot. There was like hip positioning stuff and forward facing versus inward facing. And you all can get into that. We're not doctors. Unless
no,
you're married to a chiropractor, so you can speak to this a little bit more. But
but you can
yeah,
research.
I mean, I mean, really, there's a rabbit hole of products and things. So I don't know if I want to spend too much on products, but yes, baby wearing was great because that is also good for bonding, which was a lot of the questions we got around bonding specifically, even prenatally. And,
Mhm,
I think how to get dads to bond and be involved
mhm.
in the process because it's not like they're kind of left out of it for a little while there.
Right.
Um,
Our email was from a dad or a dad
mhm, mhm.
expecting
Yeah.
dad.
So I remember there was it was a doctor. I'm blanking on his name. I want to say it was Barry Brazelton, but I could be wrong. And he's like old school pediatrician. And he used to do this thing where he would hold the baby, like the
Mm,
newborn baby, and he would have the dad talk, and the baby would turn towards the dad.
I love
Right?
that.
Like shortly after birth. And so he always highlighted to the dads that like they recognize your voice too. They recognize the mother's voice because obviously like they hear us talking when they're in our bellies. But they also can recognize the father's voice. So like talking to the belly, playing music, reading stories. I didn't read stories to my belly, but whatever, just to kind of have some interaction with it. And then continue. I read to Ansley from like the time she was like a day old, not because she understood anything, just to kind of interact with her,
Mhm.
um, and
Huh.
engage
Let her
her. Yeah.
continue to hear her voice, hear your voice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think dads can, talk to the belly or rub there's all kinds of things. If, you're concerned about stretch marks, he can grab some cocoa butter and like
We
slather
did
it
that.
on.
Yep, we did that every night. I love that. And when I think back on that, at the time it felt like survival, but like looking back, it's kind of sweet that Rob did that for me every night, every single night before bed. He rubbed all my big fat growing parts and you know lubed them up, and it
Yeah.
worked. And it was a
Yeah.
good. It was kind of like a different kind of bonding for he and I too, you know, because at some point, like you don't feel too. I mean, let me speak for myself. At some point, I turned a corner where I did not feel sexy and was
Yeah.
not interested in connecting with my husband in that way after a point in time, and that allowed for us to continue having a way to connect physically um, around the pregnancy, which was the reason that our other physical connection had shifted. And I think for him to feel engaged and involved in my body changing.
Mm,
And also, I'll tell you this, for me, from a psychological perspective, I struggled a little bit with the way my body changed. I didn't like it. I didn't feel pretty. I didn't feel sexy. I felt fat and ugly and weird. And to allow my husband to see me like that, like completely um like abashed, really, like, it was almost like exposure therapy for me to kind
mm.
of like, here it is. Here's all the weird, ugly stuff happening. Like, can you rub that spot that I can't reach with this fill in the blank oil or what? Yeah, we did coconut oil. We did the Weleda cream. God, that smell at the end of the day got to me. So I was like,
Yeah.
all the oils, but to have him kind of to bear witness and then go through that, I think helped me so much psychologically, kind of like undo or prevent any sort of like shame around my body changing too. So that was a really nice kind of all around experience. And it's a fun story to be able to tell your kiddo.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think anything like that that brings you closer together makes them feel more connected to this pregnancy. Because, I imagine from a partner's perspective who is not carrying the baby, right? Obviously, this is only if you're carrying your own children. Because if you're not, unfortunately, like this part's limited. Although I don't think that's make or break because there's plenty of bonding that happens later on. But I think to involve, your partner in that process because it's happening to the person carrying the baby. But like, how do you even explain that you feel like your body's been like hijacked sometimes? Like, also, nobody tells you the weird things that happen, like varicose veins and like, what are the like, what and how, what's happening? And you go to the doctor and they're like, yeah, because you're pregnant. That's all normal. And I'm like, someone should have listed all the normal things that happen when one is pregnant. But because it doesn't happen for everyone, right? So I don't know, but it does. I think it's nice to include them in that in whatever way feels good. Um,
That brings a question I have for you. Did you
mm,
read? Because again, you're the reader and researcher, and I was not. And part of that for me was intentional. Part of it's my personality, but part of it is we did natural childbirth, as did you. And part of what we did was we did hypnobirthing, which is using hypnosis to prepare for natural childbirth. And we had a doula and we had a midwife practice that we worked with in conjunction with an OBGYN. And we were advised to kind of stay away from books, movies, documentaries, and really to kind of protect our mental process leading up to this and to kind of create a narrative in our minds that our subconscious mind believed about this being very normal, natural, um, thing that women have been doing for decades. And so I did not read the book What to Expect When You're Expecting intentionally, which is a real source of those things. Did you read books like that?
no, we did do a birthing prep class with our doula,
Mm-hmm.
and it was lovely because I could say, I don't want to know that. Skip that info, please. Um,
But like a one-on-one thing with her.
uh-huh. Like she came to our house and did the birthing. What was it? Like a birthing. It was lovely.
We did
Um,
one. Mm-hmm.
And I did not read the books I read were all about what to do after the baby's born because I felt like the birth was a small blip and is going to happen one way or another, right? Um, and what do I do when this kid comes home?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the books I read were around after, like what do you do with the baby,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so and I didn't grow up exposed to like I'm the youngest, right? So I didn't grow up exposed to kids, or little kids. So yeah, I don't know. That was kind of my focus. All right, so let's jump into like babies here. Yay.
Okay. Yep, to your point. The baby's here. Now what?
Bonding with your baby. And this is loaded because there are all kinds of
Okay.
postpartum, potential challenges like mood disorders and postpartum depression, anxiety, stuff like that, that are very real, that can kind of influence your ability to bond with your child. But that's one of those things that you can't predict if it will impact you or not. You didn't have any, we did a podcast on
Mhm.
postpartum
Mhm.
depression. So if you guys want to, it's like one of our first or earlier podcasts, if you guys want to dive back into that. Um,
Yeah, I didn't have any trouble with bonding, thank God. I did have some intrusive thoughts, and Rob was able to provide a nice supplement that helped. It's
mhm.
a portion, a specific portion of the B complex and a high potency that really kind of kicked that to the curb for me. And I did a
Yeah.
lot to help hormones after delivery. Um, and we did extended breastfeeding too, which we can talk about more about the bonding there. But I did have those intrusive thoughts, but thank God I was able to kick those to the curb
Yeah.
naturally. Because that also plays a role too. You mentioned the postpartum depression or anxiety, and if someone either doesn't have access to powerful natural remedies, or for them that might not work, drugs can, drug therapies like an antidepressant or anti-anxiety can also be something that can challenge one's ability to have that connection and have that bond
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. And I think, we had babies a while ago. I did not feel that any of my doctors were great about screening or asking me about that. But I do think that there has been more of a push in the medical community to address mental health stuff.
Mhm.
So, OBs do see this all the time. I get clients that struggle with it, and I'll encourage them to talk to their doctors or psychiatrists or whoever is on their team of medical professionals to kind of help manage it, because it does happen, and it happens on a spectrum from like very mild, just short disruption. Like there is some normal disruption of mood. Like I do remember feeling a little out of whack the first couple of weeks as your hormones are all over the place, and I would be frustrated by things that weren't a big deal, right?
Mhm.
Um, but it shouldn't impact your ability to bond, right? It shouldn't be debilitating. It's just you don't feel like 100%.
Well, your hormones are
More.
all over the place,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, take
Yeah.
PMS on like steroids. Like it's like
Oh boy. Yeah. I was hypersensitive
I
to,
was coasting, and like I was like everything's coming up roses. And I remember sitting in Ellie's room in her chair. You have these chairs that you buy, you shop for, and like doing the nursery, and you got your chair, man. Like you've been waiting for this chair. And I was sitting there in the chair with Ellie, and she was breastfeeding or not. She maybe had fallen asleep or something. And it's like all of a sudden I just freaking lost it. Like, and thank God my stepmom, who is just the God's gift to earth, like walked in the room and she was like, honey, and I was like,
okay.
like, I don't know what's happening. And she was
Oh
like,
my
this
God.
is so normal. And she was an RN, she is a mom, and she's like, this is really normal. She was like, I was waiting for this to
Yeah, you
happen.
feel a little like unhinged though for a second though.
Yeah,
I'm like, I remember raging over towels in my linen closet, like like angry crying. And Adam's just looking at me like, he's like, I don't know what to do with this. And I'm like, because it's not rational. Like, and I knew that,
right.
but the emotion was real. So, but that's like a normal, right? Like that's your body like recalibrating. You're a little out of whack and then you bounce back. But there's therapists that special in perinatal like mood disorders and postpartum stuff. There's, your OB, your doctors. There's lots of resources for that. Um, so let's assume we're kind of in this like, you know, camp of not having to struggle with those issues, because obviously that's a little bit different. But I don't know, like I feel like it's interesting we got this question about bonding, because I don't feel like I had to try that hard to bond. You just did. You hold the baby, I nursed, you nursed. I know we did that route. Although with Ansley, I did have to end up bottle feeding. Um, so we did, I don't know, like you just
But I think you're taking for granted a big piece of philosophical underpinning that you and I both share here.
maybe, yeah, yeah,
We both fully 100% wholeheartedly, from like a theoretical, like a belief, but also an intuitive standpoint, we were 100% on board with what's called attachment parenting.
Yeah.
right? Would you agree with that statement?
Um, yes, I mean, I think it's like morphed a little bit into whatever my own weird style of parenting is as my kids have gotten older. But yes,
Back
from
then,
a newborn perspective, it was we didn't, there was no holding the baby too much or
right?
responding too much to needs, or it was like the baby cries, we respond, right? You hold your, we wore our babies like in little carriers, right? There was no, you hold the baby too much, you're gonna spoil it. Like, I don't think there was none of that. It was very much like connecting with this baby and making sure this baby's needs were met at the
Right.
time that they had the need, right? And this idea that no need is insignificant. If your baby needs to be held, that is a valid need that
Mhm.
should be met.
Right.
Um, right. So yes, I mean, right. So that's kind of
And
how
that's pretty firmly steeped in child development and child psychology, and not everybody might be aware of that. But yes, the basis of that, right, is the understanding that from 0 to 3, the brain is forming an attachment style, and the way the brain forms that is by answering the question, when I have a need, is my need going to be met? And is it going to be met by my person, right? And for most babies, their mama is their person. Sometimes it's dad, sometimes it's grandma or an adoptive figure. But for most babies, it's mom, right? And so when I cry, are you going to answer me? Like literally and figuratively, right? When I'm cold, are you going to warm me up? When I'm hungry, you're going to feed me. When I'm scared, are you going to hold me? When I am hungry, are you going to feed me? Did I say that already? When I cry,
yeah.
do you come to me? Right. And so this question of the big picture question, right, that the infant doesn't know it's asking, but the brain is formulating an answer to based on experience is, are my needs going to be met, and are they going to be met with consistency? And
Yes.
that
Am
forms
I
the
safe?
am I
Right?
safe? Is this
Is
world
this
a safe
world
place?
safe? Yeah.
And so our task as new moms was above and beyond all else. Like, yeah, we keep the baby alive, right? But then secondary to that is to answer this question of, when I call, are you going to answer me? And is the world a safe place based on my behavior as a mom, right? Because I am answering that question in the brain.
Hmm.
Um, and it's interesting because studies show this forms what's called a secure attachment style. And the kind of one way to think about what that means is that I'm okay, you're okay, the world's okay, we're all going to be just fine. Right.
Yeah.
That is the epitome of one way to think about what a secure attachment style is. It's not anxious, it's not avoidant, it's not disorganized. It's pretty grounded, pretty like, yeah, we're all good, man. Right. And this is made, it's funny because a lot of times I'll hear people, new parents, talk about, well, will I create a needy child if I'm always meeting their needs? Don't they need to learn how to be independent? The interesting thing is what studies show is that the more we do meet the needs, I guess allowing them to be needy, if you will, when they truly are needy, right? Like infants can't do that stuff for themselves, man. We have to do it. The more we do it, then they get to a point where they're like, oh, okay, cool. Like you're good, I'm good, the world's good. I got this, man. Like I
Yeah.
literally remember at like whenever the first phrase thing happens, Ellie's first phrase, she's walking down the hallway in our little brick ranch in Smyrna, Georgia, with like half dressed. I don't know what half was dressed, you know, how little 1.5-year-olds do. And she goes, I got this. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, because,
Right.
right, if I learned that my needs are met and I am safe, the world is safe, I can now safely go explore said world and practice my independence. And I learn eventually, as I have more skill set, that I can also then solve my own needs, meet my own needs, because I've learned from parent, whoever, caregiver, that, oh, my needs get met and in this way. And then as you kind of grow and develop, you learn how to meet those same needs for yourself, right? Obviously, you're not super capable of doing a lot of things as a baby. So yes, it takes into consideration the fact that, oh, a couple of points. Every need is valid.
Mhm.
So the need for my sticking point with children in general and parents will say like, they're just doing it for attention. I'm like, okay, so in your adult world, do you ever do anything for attention?
Right.
Ever? Like never with your spouse? Do you just bait them a little bit to get that acknowledgement that you've been seeking, right? That is a need, that is a
Right.
connection need, and that is a valid need. How
Mhm.
we get that need met may be good or not so great, but
Right.
it is a valid need. So
Mhm.
it's the idea that like every need is valid.
Mhm.
And the idea that babies can't manipulate, and I heard this for years, and it's still like she's just going to manipulate me. Again, every need is valid, even the need for attention and closeness. If your baby's crying just because they want to be held, they need to feel close, they need to feel safe, they need to feel comforted. um so I think, yes, it's meeting those needs. And it's interesting because I don't know. I mean, we had some struggles with our first around. We would have these like crying fits that lasted hours, and I would be holding her and bouncing on a yoga ball for hours in the middle of the night, and I'm in tears because she won't stop crying. And I
Mhm.
couldn't make her stop crying, and there's nothing I did worked. I fed her, I changed her, like I don't know if she was colicky. I don't know. But I remember feeling like this is horrible. She's screaming. I remember Adam coming in being like, "How do we make this stop? What does she want from us?" And again, I think there may have been some other stuff going on that, we never put our finger on. But even with that, like those moments of like, "Oh my God, like I can't meet whatever this need is."
Yeah.
Because if it was a physical pain inside, I couldn't take that away. And I remember being in tears, and the one thing I sat with was, well, shit, I can't help her. I can't make her feel better, but I can ride with her through this. So
Right.
I held that screaming kid until she fell back asleep.
Mhm.
Hours later, I'm crying, she's crying. I did not show it was okay, Katie. I did not. I was in tears, but I sat there, right? And so I think it can sound like, "Oh, I meet their need and they stop crying," or "I do this and everything's great and they'll never," but, like,
Right.
sometimes your kid just has stuff that you can't fix. Colicky babies, for example, it's not, you know, but you can still be there to show them that you will keep them safe as best as you can.
And isn't that the crux of any good intimate relationship, whether it's spouse, mother, daughter, when we're adults, or, best friend relationship, like that I can't fix it for you, but I'm a damn sure going to be right beside you in it,
Yeah,
And there's
yeah,
sometimes we can help, right? Like, we can ask for things from those people and can you do this for me? Because it would be helpful. But like other times, like we just are together in painful times, man. And yeah, we just ride it out.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think, right, like all of that early stage bonding comes down to meeting the needs. I think that's like the most basic thing you can do is feed them when they're hungry. Um,
I
you know,
think eye contact is important, right?
but
Eye contact.
yeah, I talked to my kids a lot. I would narrate what we were doing in parks. I was home with them and super lonely. Like, but I would narrate what I'm doing. I read stories, or if I was reading, whatever I was reading, I read to them. It didn't necessarily matter before they were, able to understand. Um,
Can I add? I want to add something to that. This is another thing that I think a misconception I hear a lot from parents that I'd like to put my 2 cents worth in. 'Cause this is our podcast, and I can.
yeah.
Um, I hear a lot of parents feeling this belief or experiencing a belief that they have to fill in the blank because they're parents now, right? So things like I have to get on the floor and play blocks, or I have to get on the floor and play Barbies, or I can't go to Target, or I can't go to the library, or I can't go to the gym, right? Or whatever it is, I can't do these things, or I have to do these things because this is what being a parent feels like. And
Mhm.
I think as a both a therapist who's been practicing for a long time and witnessing lots of other people's experiences from that perspective, and also doing it really differently myself, just kind of intuitively, I guess, or maybe from some of what we learned in school and stuff. But like, I would strap that kid to me and I would do what I wanted. I would go to Target, I'd go to the gym, I'd go walk around the block and I'd do it again. And I'd go in the garden, I'd get in the dirt and I'd whatever, fill in the blank, go to your house and blah, 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 right? And um, that kept my mood up. And so, from a place of a more active, elevated mood,
Mhm.
right? That and after a cup of coffee,
Yeah.
tea, or whatever, right? We're more alert and we're more able to engage, we're more able to meet those needs, we're more able to make eye contact. There's another skill we call mirroring, right, where we kind of, I forget, Claudia, you know what age this starts to happen, where children want to engage with you, and the task of the parent is to engage back, right? Like they make a facial expression, you make it back, right? And you kind of parallel one another, and that is very powerful for
Mhm.
bonding. Pet
Yeah.
people happens with pets too, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so when we are in a positive place, right, because our needs are met, we fed ourselves, we've been around the block, we have
Yeah.
taken a shower, we're doing activities that light us up within reason. I'm not advocating like throw your kid on your back and go to the freaking, I don't know what, strip club, but like, like,
As one might or might not do, right? No, yeah, right, that fill your own cup so you have more to give
you're
because it
the
is
best
exhausting.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have
I
to
might
be the
remember going to your house a lot and I would just like sit on your chairs in your living room and like it was I needed to get out of the house. I needed to talk to someone who was an adult. I needed to, and like I think we did that a good amount
Yep.
in those early days. Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree with, I think it's meeting your kids' needs, meeting your own needs so that you can meet your child's needs, right? Like a depleted parent, how do you give can't, what you don't have to give?
Mhm.
Um, and then I think staying playful with your kid, like all these silly games that like peekaboo, there is an attachment. There's a type of therapy called theraplay for littles 5 and under. And a lot of that is things like rubbing lotion on the baby. And it's an attachment based therapy, right? To build attachment that may have been disrupted for various reasons, right? Maybe it was postpartum, maybe it's adoption, maybe it's all these things. But some of the interventions are like rubbing lotion,
Mhm.
which I did. My kid would get a bath and we would like, lube them up, right? Giving a bath or peekaboo is great because what happens is baby disappears. So they think because they're not, object permanence isn't there yet. And then look how excited she is when she found me, right?
Right.
I remember having some really lame games of hide and seek with my kids where they thought they were hiding, and I'm like, "You're like literally in the middle of the room, right?" But all of these games are attachment building. So playing, and if getting on the floor and doing blocks isn't your thing, that's okay.
Something.
There's a lot of different ways you can connect, and
Right.
your kid might not like all the games either. So finding playful ways to connect. We used to do this thing where we'd have like Ansley on the bed. She was a little bigger, she could sit up, and we would like hide on the other side and just jump up randomly. And like we did it because she giggled and it was lovely to hear her giggle. But we played all kinds of games like that. As they get older, my kids like to wrestle. Just the other day, my youngest was like, "Can you make me an airplane where I like hold her on my feet and she like
Yeah.
flies?" I mean, now she's almost 10, but like those are the things, right? Those attachment. Maybe she remembers it from being little where I would hold her up, but those games that were like, "Oh, those are kind of silly," or "Why do people play that?" Like that's why we play them because
Yeah.
those are attachment bonding games. And I think for dads, kind of circling back to that, there's a lot of times where they may not be able to help. If you're nursing, kind of not super helpful. If you can pump and give them a bottle, maybe that works. Not all babies take bottles. It's a whole thing, right? But they can play these
Right.
games,
And
right? They
sometimes,
can hold and soothe and
right.
yeah.
And dads sometimes are better at that. I think there's, I mean, not, it could be, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. Let's ask an anthropologist one day, but I wonder if men aren't better at play, right, than women. I think, and then maybe if you that's an overgeneralization, but I'd be curious to know what somebody who would be an expert at that would say. And then if you add that the mom usually is that primary source of safety, nurturing, right? If you are breastfeeding, you're the one doing it. If you're staying home with the baby, at least even a little bit, right? You're the one changing them and napping them and feeding them, and that that takes a lot, right? And so to have dad come in and be like, "I will play," right?
Mhm.
Woo, thank God, so I can shower, or I can stretch, or I can yoga, or I can pray, or I can potty, or whatever, right? Eat, to
Yeah.
have dad. Well, I can do that, right? I can play. I can do that. Yes, please go ahead, dad.
Yeah. And I don't know if it has to be like those specific roles, because I think of a reality where maybe mom returns to work and dad stays home,
Right.
right?
That's right.
And we get into the stereotypes of it simply because of biology, right? Like if you are a female who carried your child and you choose to nurse, there is a biological reality of like you are going to be providing the food for that baby,
Right.
right? But the baby doesn't care who that person is, right? If you
Hmm.
adopt a baby,
Right.
and you're not nursing and you're a man, for example, like you can still bond in this way. It's just sometimes the gender roles get assigned based on honestly who has the food
Yeah.
availability. But those roles can be mixed up and moved around, right? Different people can do different things. Um, but I do, you know, yes, I think the person who ends up being maybe the one who's home more, right, gets maybe a little more burnt out. I also think that sometimes we connect in the ways we can, and that's okay too, right? Like honoring the fact that different partners may connect with the baby differently. One maybe the playful one is the, I'll get the band-aids and clean up the boo-boo one. Like it's you find your groove, you
Right.
know.
And you
And
don't
I
have to be
would say, like,
complaining.
your relationship is like this too. It was you guys both did like the nurturing. It's not like you were the only one nurturing. Like Rob was super hands-on, Adam was super hands-on. There were diapers and holding and snuggling and so but I think all those things are helpful for bonding, and I think it's finding your in, like what works for you and where you can do that, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, such a precious time too. I love it. There's so many wonderful things. If clients or listeners want to um, learn more, attachment parenting is a nice topic to research, right? Baby wearing is a nice topic to research, to look more into. You mentioned TheraPlay is a nice topic to do some research into. So there's definitely resources out there for sure. And like we mentioned too, if you are going to be working with a doula or often a midwife, they have a lot of knowledge they can bring to the table around these types of things as well. And there's communities, right? And now we live in the age of online, right? So whether you meet with people in person who are trying to achieve the same goals, again, getting out of the house, connecting with other human beings as you're able, or you join something online where you can connect and chat about your experiences with other moms and dads have the same goal, because not everybody thinks about these things. So it's kind of cool that our listener asked these questions. This is kind of like a higher order type of a thought process, right? Not only like, how do I keep this human alive, but how do I bond with him or her so that they have the best chance of emotional development?
Yeah. Yeah. And we're gonna have to do a part two of this, I think, because there was more questions, like how do you introduce siblings? Maybe we can do a whole podcast on managing multiple peoples. I know you had a bonus child and then Ellie. So you had two with a big age gap. So you were in like different realms of parenting. And then I had two relatively close together. So maybe part two of this, we can dive into to keeping that bond and managing multiple people,
I
multiple
love
little.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
All
That'll be
right,
our
everybody. So that'll be next time. We'll do that next time. Have a
yes.
good.
Yay.
Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks for listening.